Look around. We are quite literally surrounded by screens. We're constantly consuming, endlessly swiping, always tapped in. But, have you ever actually stopped for a second to wonder how the invisible machinery of this entire digital universe really functions? Well, today in this explainer, we're going to peel back the layers of the digital economy and expose exactly what is powering the internet's biggest platforms.
Okay, let's dive into this incredibly famous saying, if you're not paying for the product, you are the product. I mean, you've definitely heard this before, right? It just perfectly establishes the central paradox that you and I experience every single day. See, when we use these massive digital platforms, we usually aren't the actual customers making a financial purchase. Instead, our attention, our behavior, and our data, those become the highly valuable assets that are monetized. The platform is actually creating value by capturing our attention and selling access to it.
And that leads us directly to a fascinating question. And I want you to keep this in the back of your mind as we go through this explainer. Why exactly do some of the most valuable products in the entire world cost absolutely nothing? Seriously, if users aren't paying a dime, how on earth do these companies become worth billions or even trillions of dollars? What is actually being bought and sold when an incredibly complex app is completely free to just download and use?
Let's start with Section 1, the paradox of free. Now, what's really interesting about this slide is the sheer contrast. Historically, the business model was a super direct, visible transaction. A customer hands over capital in exchange for a physical product, like food or manufactured goods. Simple, right? But the internet completely upended this. Digital platforms can distribute services, think search engines, emails, social networks, at practically zero marginal cost. Because distribution is basically free, the cost to the consumer completely dropped to zero, and that shifted the actual profit engine entirely toward digital advertising and data collection. Moving on to Section 2, scarcity in a world of abundance.
So basic economics dictates that when a resource like information becomes perfectly abundant, something else must become scarce. And that scarcity, it's human attention. Because our cognitive bandwidth is strictly limited. We only have so many hours in a day, right? Our focus becomes a highly prized commodity. So, welcome to the attention economy. Businesses fiercely compete for it because attention influences behavior. And where attention flows, well, money inevitably follows.
If we look at the specific characteristics of this attention economy, I guarantee they're going to feel intensely familiar to you. There's this fierce competition for your engagement. Platforms are serving up highly personalized content, entirely driven by algorithmic recommendations. They rely on continuous notifications to pull you right back in when you put your phone down, and infinite scrolling to make sure there's never a natural stopping point. Every single one of these structural architectures is explicitly engineered with one major objective: maximizing your user retention.
Which brings us to Section 3, the engine of engagement.
Just look at how user behavior directly translates into platform value. Modern platforms use these recommendation algorithms that are just constantly learning from your behavior. Every click, every extra second of watch time, likes, shares, comments, viewing duration, these aren't just actions, they are vital signals. This data helps platforms massively improve their recommendations and increase overall engagement. And ultimately, better data improves prediction, which skyrockets advertising effectiveness. And it's really vital to note here that algorithms aren't out there optimizing for truth or even quality. They are mathematically analyzing behavioral signals purely to improve monetization. And this brilliantly illustrates how it creates a self-reinforcing cycle, often called the engagement feedback loop. It's a four-step dance. Step 1, content is posted. Step 2, that content triggers user engagement. Step 3, the algorithm sees that engagement spiking and promotes the content further. Step 4, this leads to even more visibility, which drives more engagement, which prompts creators to make even more of that specific type of content. It's wild. Creators adapt to what performs, audiences adapt to what is heavily promoted, and the platforms adapt to the engagement patterns.
To keep this massive loop spinning, digital systems optimize around core psychological stimuli. Actually, it's the exact same behavioral triggers you'd find in a casino slot machine. Novelty, intense emotion, social proof, deep curiosity, and that unpredictable anticipation of a reward. Now, it's not necessarily malicious manipulation, it's simply a system acting exactly on its incentive structures to keep you continually pulled in.
Let's step back and look at Section 4, system incentives and risks.
So the crucial point here is that every single system optimizes for something based purely on its incentives. Think about a traditional bank. A bank optimizes for risk management. Honestly, if they don't, they fail. A retail store optimizes for sales. A social platform, on the exact other hand, optimizes for user engagement. The outcomes we're seeing in society today simply reflect those core incentives. Understanding what a system is economically incentivized to do is absolutely the best way to explain its behavior.
When we look at this completely objectively, we see a really delicate balance of incredible benefits and significant societal challenges. The positive impacts are undeniably massive. We have unprecedented access to information and education, totally seamless global connectivity, and the rise of thriving creator economies. We definitely aren't here to just criticize technology, but we also have to recognize the potential risks, right? Things like reduced attention spans, severe information overload, rising societal polarization, and excessive engagement loops driven by algorithmic influence. These outcomes largely emerge directly from those incentive structures we just talked about, rather than some deliberate malicious intent.
Finally, we reach Section 5, the invisible transaction.
You know, a lot of people just assume digital platforms sell content, but a deeper perspective shows us that platforms actually facilitate an attention exchange. On the surface, the visible product is the free app, the amazing content, the videos, the messaging, but the invisible product, that's your attention and your behavioral data. The visible service is free, sure, but the invisible transaction is happening continuously, right there in the background. The core transaction from that old traditional business model hasn't really disappeared at all. It has just become entirely hidden.
So why does all this matter so much for us? Well, historically, power came from very tangible things: land, natural resources, military strength, and capital. But increasingly, in our modern world, influence and power are directly linked to visibility and attention. Everyday individuals, massive global brands, huge creators, and powerful institutions are all fiercely competing for visibility. Attention has literally become the most vital strategic asset of our time.
Which leaves us with this final, really profound thought to reflect on today. We've seen exactly how the invisible engine works, how algorithms harvest our data, and how pure scarcity drives value. But as we move forward into this increasingly digital future, we really have to ask ourselves, what happens when entire industries compete for your attention? Definitely keep that in mind the next time you casually scroll through a free feed. Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer. Keep asking those big questions and keep exploring the hidden systems that truly shape our world.